Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex topics and really try to get to the core ideas. Today, we're diving into a, let's say, challenging perspective on climate change, something that's obviously central to, well, everything right now. We're looking at an analysis from Mookie Tenenbaum. He offers a pretty different way to look at the whole climate change conversation. Our goal today is to explore his thoughts, especially around the economic side and maybe the philosophical underpinnings he sees driving this narrative.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because Tenenbaum isn't just talking about what people say about climate change. He's digging into the why.
Yeah.
Connecting into these bigger economic forces, societal shifts. It's definitely a distinct viewpoint, encourages you to look at this often very heated topic from a few different angles.
Okay, so let's get into it. Tenenbaum kicks off by pointing out this shift in language, right? About 15 years back, he notes how global warming sort of got rebranded, became climate change.
Exactly. And he argues this wasn't accidental. It was strategic, in his view. The idea being maybe global warming was getting harder to, consistently demonstrate, or at least easier to debate if you had a cold spell. But climate change, that's tougher to deny because, the climate's always changing, isn't it? That's its nature.
Yeah.
So it really makes you think about how language shapes how we even perceive these huge global issues.
That framing point is interesting. But then he hits his main argument, right? That above all, this whole climate change narrative is fundamentally a business. He even uses that example from the pandemic, which I thought was quite striking. When COVID hit, suddenly climate change wasn't front and center anymore. It dropped way down the list of public worries.
Mm-hmm. And Tenenbaum uses that to suggest the urgency we feel about climate change isn't maybe as fixed as we think. It seems to fluctuate based on what else is going on, which for him just reinforces that it's driven by business interests. He also touches on something else, how anyone suggesting maybe the situation's irreversible or that we can't fix it, those voices get silenced. Acaladas, as he puts it.
Why? Because if there's no hope,
there's no reason to invest. Right. If you truly believe it's game over, why pour billions into solutions?
Yeah.
It's a kind of stark financial logic he's pointing to.
Okay, so if it's a business, who's actually benefiting? Who are the players Tenenbaum identifies?
Well, he points straight at the big investment groups, mentions BlackRock specifically, these huge entities pouring capital into, renewable energy companies, solar, wind, tidal power.
All the green tech.
Exactly. Plus recycling, technologies for reducing carbon footprints. And of course, the media plays a role. Disasters sell, they generate clicks, eyeballs, discussion. It feeds the cycle.
And it's not just investing in existing stuff, is it? He stresses how whole new industries have kind of sprouted up just around this. Things like carbon capture, right? Special factory filters, companies trying to pull carbon out of the air.
Yeah, managing specific gases, minerals. These are entirely new sectors, often requiring massive investment. Big money stuff. And then there's the whole bureaucracy built around it. Think of all the NGOs, the UN committees.
Right.
Plus, the carbon credit market. That's huge now. Companies that pollute less get these credits.
Which they can then sell to companies that pollute more.
Precisely. It creates this whole financial ecosystem directly tied to emissions levels. It's a clear example of how, in Tenenbaum's view, economic incentives can build up around a perceived problem.
He even brings it down to the local level, like London fining people for not separating their trash correctly.
Yeah, he suggests cities are often quite happy to find these new ways to generate revenue, hire more people for enforcement, regulations. It becomes self-perpetuating in a way.
So what's the underlying strategy here, according to him, the marketing angle?
He basically describes it as classic marketing. First, create a need, a discomfort, a problem. Make people feel they're lacking something or facing a threat. Then you offer the solution. His analogy was selling white shoes first, convince everyone they need white shoes, then sell them the shoes.
So like electric cars, for instance.
Exactly. Create the demand, then provide the product. But he also questions electric cars themselves, doesn't he? Like, do they really pollute less overall? When you factor in making the batteries, generating the electricity, disposing of them. It's not always clear-cut. He wants us to look at the bigger picture.
Which brings us to the science itself. Or maybe Tenenbaum's questions about it. He seems skeptical about predicting the future this way, contrasting climate models with something like, say, gravity, which you can test over and over.
Right. He says climate projections rely heavily on computer models of the future, which are inherently complex and uncertain, unlike gravity, which is constant, observable, repeatable. And he lays out these three conditions he thinks are needed to really properly engage with the issue.
Okay, what are they?
First, high consensus among scientists that it will happen. though he adds a caveat about which scientists and what counts as consensus. Second, strong proof it's human-caused. And here he actually concedes there's good proof, which is interesting.
But the third one?
That's the sticking point for him. Can it be reversed? He sees this as mostly theoretical. We don't know if the actions we take will actually fix it. And that uncertainty, for him, makes it hard to justify the massive cost and effort based purely on science.
So what's the implication then? He asks some pretty challenging questions based on that, doesn't he? Like, are all the potential outcomes of climate change automatically worse? Could some places actually benefit, maybe get more rain where it's needed?
Yeah, he pushes back on the idea that all change is negative. Maybe some is just different.
Mm-hmm.
Winners and losers. And this leads to his core question about priorities. Is it truly better, he asks, to spend trillions today trying to save a future planet?
When millions are suffering right now from poverty, disease, lack of clean water.
Exactly. He's quite blunt. He thinks humans need saving more than the planet does right now. And the philosophical question, why are future generations automatically more important than people alive today? Why do we have to make these huge sacrifices? Until those questions are answered, he argues, the whole thing is still primarily operating like a business.
Then he takes it even further. He calls the climate movement. Well, he says it has all the symbols of a religion. That's a strong statement.
It is. His thinking seems to be that as traditional religion fades for some, climate change fills that gap. It provides a kind of meaning, a purpose, a crusade. He points to how the messaging shifted too, remember, from do it for your grandkids to it's happening right now, to keep that urgency alive.
And the guilt factor.
Oh yeah. He emphasizes the role of moral consciousness, making people feel guilty to pressure them into action. He suggests maybe people act out of social pressure, not always deep conviction or certainty.
He also brings up cancellation, how questioning the narrative can get you silenced. He even compares it to Holocaust denial, though he's careful to differentiate.
Right, he says the Holocaust is a proven historical fact, whereas the future impact of climate change is still, by definition, uncertain. It's a projection.
And the hypocrisy. Private jets to climate conferences.
He definitely points that out. Flying private, charging huge fees, leaving massive carbon footprints while preaching austerity. He sees a disconnect there. And it all ties back to his point about science. Real science, he argues, needs open debate, skepticism. But he feels this topic has become almost dogmatic.
Like a religion, as he said.
Yeah, with these apocalyptic stories, the planet's destruction, a sort of final judgment if we don't act. He contrasts it with a real, measurable threat like an asteroid. Climate change is distant, uncertain, yet demands immediate, drastic action fueled by perhaps fear and guilt.
Okay, so if it's a business with winners and losers, who does Tenenbaum see as losing out in this scenario?
Well, the obvious ones are the traditional car manufacturers, the
Yeah.
ones making combustion engines. They're clearly facing huge pressure. He uses that Tesla example. Stock dropped when U.S. subsidies were pulled under Trump.
Yeah.
Shows how much relies on government policy right
Good
now.
way.
He also suggests, look, if this narrative faded, think of all the jobs linked to it. People in UN bodies, NGOs, climate consultancies.
Even in countries paid not to cut down forests.
Exactly. Places in South America, Africa. There's a whole economy there that depends on the climate agenda continuing.
And he talks about that global divide, the Grieta, he calls it.
Countries like India, China saying, hey, you guys in the West polluted for 150 years to get rich. Now it's our turn. They resist restrictions.
I want to develop, too.
Understandably. And this leads to his point about proportionality. He uses the Netherlands as an example.
Tiny country population-wise.
Right, maybe 1% of the global population. But they impose these incredibly strict rules, lower speed limits, talk of getting rid of most of their pigs because of methane. Tenenbaum argues this is more about the Dutch feeling less guilty than actually changing the global climate. Even if the whole country stopped emitting tomorrow, it would barely make a dent globally, in his view.
What about the U.S., with its political swings?
He notes that pattern.
Yeah.
Democratic administrations, Biden, Obama, tend to go big on climate initiatives, often racking up debt. His slightly cynical take is, the money isn't mine, meaning they're willing to spend heavily, issue bonds.
Whereas Republicans,
like Trump, tend to look at it purely as a business decision. Question the cost, the return on investment, argue for fiscal prudence. This back and forth creates massive uncertainty. And, he suggests, as taxes go up everywhere to pay for these climate plans, sometimes hitting really high percentages.
people might start questioning it more.
Yeah, they might be less willing to believe, as he puts it, when it hits their wallet directly and significantly.
So, last piece. Technology and AI. What's Tenenbaum's take there?
It's interesting. He actually thinks future tech, especially AI, might be the real solution if and when serious climate problems actually materialize.
But he has issues with current AI.
Big issues. He calls current AI models totally biased. Says they give these pre-programmed answers on climate change. You try to have a nuanced discussion, ask basic questions, and it just shuts you down with this standard narrative. Makes genuine inquiry difficult, he feels.
And he thinks this bias isn't necessarily political.
No, he frames it as a business decision again.
How so?
Well, the AI companies themselves, he argues, benefit from the climate change industry. All the research, the data analysis, the modeling, it generates work for them. So they have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo narrative. It raises that question, doesn't it? How objective can a technology be if its creators have skin in the game, economically speaking?
Wow. Okay, that was quite the deep dive into Tenenbaum's perspective. It really does give you a different framework for thinking about the economics, the philosophy, even the psychology behind it all.
It definitely does. His analysis pushes you to look beyond just the surface arguments and ask why things are being framed a certain way, and critically, who benefits. It's a good reminder that these huge global narratives are rarely as simple as they seem. Hearing multiple viewpoints is crucial.
So, for you listening, what does this all mean? It's easy to get caught up in the dominant conversation, but Tenenbaum asks us to hit pause, to really consider, how do we weigh tackling potential future problems against solving very real, very present crises? And maybe more fundamentally, how do we tell the difference between urgent scientific necessity and potentially a very profitable narrative? That's certainly something to mull over as we all try to make sense of our complex world.